Everyone, thanks for joining us. We are now live. Sorry, we're a little late. We are running on queer time.
Yeah.
Uh, my name is Aster Gilbert. I'm the genre queer coordinator at Milwaukee Film. And thank you for joining us for two very special guests, filmmakers from the film Pier Kids, The Life. This is brought to you by Genre Queer and the Minority Health Film Series, which is sponsored by Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin. Thanks for joining me, Chester and Elegance. I guess to get started, I'll throw it over to you if you want to introduce yourselves and your roles in the film Pier Kids.
Yes, I am Chester Algernal Gordon. I am the producer of Pier Kids.
And I am Elegance Bratton, and I am the director, writer of Pier Kids, cinematographer of Pier Kids. Yeah, a bunch of other titles I don't need to say.
You could do the film student thing and list your name for like 20 things. That's definitely my student films look like that. Also, before we dive in, for people watching at home, please post your questions in YouTube, and then we can ask those questions to Chester and Elegance here. First of all, how are you both doing?
We're really good, actually. Yeah, we've just been working, getting a lot of work done. Signing deals.
Having frosé.
Yeah, having frosé, going for long walks.
Quarantine frosé walks.
Wonderful.
It's fantabulous. Just really productive and getting to love each other more, and just it's been amazing. I'm with my best friend every day. It doesn't get any better than that.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear. So I guess to dive into Pier Kids, I'll start with some basic questions. We've chatted about this before, but I'd love to hear, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear, how did this film project get started? How did you both get drawn into this film as a project?
Sure. I started making this movie in 2011 after the first semester of my freshman year in undergrad. I had a sociology teacher who gave us a prompt to find social networks that happen in real life. And I was also dealing with a lot of existential pain over the fact that, at the end of the semester, I didn't really feel the presence of home the same way that my fellow students did, where they had parents picking them up and, stuffed animals and pets. It was just me going to the pier. So then one day I looked up and I'm like, oh, right. This is what home is. Home is where you're understood. And I saw a bunch of people there that looked like me, and I had this prompt from my professor to write this paper. So instead of writing the paper, I ended up taking a camera down and beginning to film interviews. And that summer, about a month into it, I met Crystal. And Crystal, after kind of giving her my academic military hybrid form of documentary inquiry, which is basically like, here, answer these questions about yourself and I get you, right? She kind of stopped me in my tracks. She was like, Elliot, if you want me to be in your film, if you want to make a movie about my life, you have to be my friend. You have to be on my side. The camera has to be on my side. And once that happened, it changed the way I reacted to the situation as a filmmaker. It was no longer about cataloging information. It was more so about communicating an experience of friendship. I started a Kickstarter. I was very inspired. I finally found my message. I raised almost $50,000. I shot 400 hours of footage, loved the footage, tried to cut it together. This is 2014 now, and realized I didn't know how to cut a movie. I didn't know how to edit a movie. I knew how to shoot a movie now, but I didn't know how to edit one. One of my producers, old producer at the time, applied to Tish, was like, well, I produced your movie. I can get in the Tish. I'm like, well, if you can get in for producing, I should be able to get in for writing and directing. So I applied, and then through the process of narrative film, I started to learn how to cut a movie. But really, truly, the changing factor that got me from 400 hours of footage to the film that you see is meeting my husband, my now husband, in the summer of 2014.
So when I got to Pier Kids, it was a 15-minute cut for the Sundance Labs and the documentary labs, and we didn't get in, so we waited a year again to reapproach it, and Elegance and I painted one of the walls in the apartment, the chalkboard wall, and he wrote the outline in one night, like committed to it, and he did it. And we took that outline, took photos of it, and sent it over to the editor, Bernhardt. And we got together a little budget, scrapped it together, and paid Bernhardt and Tuto to cut the film. And they cut it in a 3-act structure in which it was laid out in, and gave us each of those, and through a lot of notes and a lot of questions and heavy conversations, we got it done. And Outfest also gave us a deadline because we knew we wanted to premiere it there. So, it helped us a lot to know that we had to have a cut ready by, July. Like everything had to be on this DCP to show the world by this time, which it helped. It was a deadline.
And now it's at Milwaukee.
Yes.
The best food town in America. I love eating in Milwaukee. I'm so sad I'm not there to eat.
It's a good beer and cheese town for sure.
It's so good.
I want to talk about the editing for a second because I'm obsessed with editing. I think it's one of my favorite parts of filmmaking and just looking at films. I'm interested to know, like, how much of the film do you feel was discovered in the editing? Because I know different filmmakers have different philosophies, right? They shoot a film and then it's about editing the film to best represent what they shot. And then other filmmakers film a bunch of stuff and then they like totally discover what the film is while it's being cut together. Do you feel you fall more in one of those categories, or I'll see an answer coming in?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the latter. I'm definitely a person who's like, it's not to say that I don't have a plan. Like I definitely, like in my narrative work, I write a script, I do all the work, but I think that I look at editors in a sense as co-writers in a way. And I always want to allow, like when I cut a movie, I don't really cut it the first time. I give it to the editor and I walk away for, a couple of weeks and I come back to see the movie that they saw, right? Because it's, it's fresh eyes. It's like getting someone to read your script again and to tell you what they see in it. And then once I see what they saw, I kind of match it up to what I was seeing in my head. And then from there, the script is a guide, but not necessarily a rule. That's how I edit films in general. And then this film in particular, there's an elliptical and poetic style that I wanted to use. I wanted to employ like a verite, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of this phrase, triple shot technique. But basically when something is happening in a documentary, you can film it 3 different times from 3 very different angles. And by cutting those 3 shots together, you can create a scene that can, you're a scene. And I found that technique to be really, really conducive in the edit to verite styles of shooting where, I'm in the moment and I'm just kind of reacting emotionally because I'm the one holding the camera most of the film. So, the triple shot technique with that applied in the edit allowed for a rhythmic pattern that allowed it to be more of a film about emotional crescendos than it is about plot. And like, we're oriented around how it feels to be in the skin versus being oriented around what it is that we're trying to do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't like to talk about how I make it because sometimes I feel like I sound like just irritatingly esoteric,
No, not at all. I'm also like, as a film nerd, I love to hear how like the technical process of the production of the film. And I think that one of the things that really shines through in Pier Kids is this combination that you're talking about. It's very lyrical. It's very beautiful in a sense, while also dealing with like very difficult issues that I think a lot of other films don't handle that well. They tend to make poverty and homelessness only look ugly or miserable. And it tends to, I don't know, not necessarily exploit the subjects, but
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think that's the right word. The language of cinema is we don't give pictures, we take pictures. Like from its very DNA, the art form is very much one of attraction. Now my cat, she's figured out that there's a camera nearby, so
Mine might join us in a minute, so it's a party.
But yeah, like I was definitely conscious of trying to have a gaze, a cinematic gaze that was not how you normally see this community, right? Like Paris is Burning is probably one of the bigger influences on just on me as an artist in general, but especially on this film. And I always go back to that scene in Paris is Burning where they're at the ball and they're waiting for the girls, and Jenny asks, the character, like, well, what are you waiting for? Well, we're waiting for the girls, the trans girls. I'm like, where are they? They're out working. My film is the inverse of that. We're out with them working, and we only barely go to the ball. And I did that intentionally to kind of orient the POV of this film within that of being a Pier kid. Like, anybody who watches this movie, I want them to be a Pier kid for an hour and a half, right? So that's kind of how I deal with the question of exploitation, is to say that, like, rather than present this community as if it's just frozen in poverty, waiting for someone like me to poke my light around and show the world, instead, we participate in this community as an essential part of life, without whom we would not know where we're going. We would have nothing to do.
That brings up, I think, one other question about editing before, like, because bringing up influences, I definitely want to talk about influences. But is this the editing journey in the process and where the film is at now? Will you continue to edit or add anything to this film or work with the rest of that footage? Or is this, the film is done, this is what it is, on to the next project?
It's done. I mean, there's a part of me that, like, when the movie is finally sold and distributed, I want to give the characters 5%. And obviously one of the characters, Casper, passed. So what I want to do is start a nonprofit. And I've definitely toyed around with the idea. And it's a film-centered nonprofit teaching homeless queer youth how to use the art of, like, documentary to get into life opportunities like college, and use that to get housing, and just trying to find a way to employ them so that they can be relevant in the economy. But all of that to say, like, in that nonprofit, I've definitely thought about having there be multiple chapters that those young people who would use these programs would add to themselves. But as far as me doing it, if this film is done, there's a part of me that might want to do a television version of it, or like a fictional version of it at some point. But this movie is she's cooked.
Awesome. I love it. And that was that the cat, or was that just a technical noise?
Cat. This is the cat. She is very much purring, and she's I think she likes you.
Oh, that's what I live for, is the approval of cats that I meet, even virtually during quarantine. Forgot what I was going to say. Thanks, Kitty. I guess I remember. So I think this project that you mentioned of teaching poor and homeless queer youth filmmaking practices raises this question for me that I think Pier Kids also brings up, is what do you see the importance of people who are connected to the communities that they're filming being involved in the process of documenting those stories and telling those stories? Because I think Paris is Burning is a really great example where it's this landmark film, this amazing film, but there is this issue that trails it about Jenny Livingston being an outsider to the community, but the film still has this impact and this importance. But I'm wondering, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on kind of the role of the filmmaker as a member of the community or as an outsider taking the images, as you mentioned.
I think it has a lot to do. I think that has a lot to do with the point of view, because I think that when you're outsider, you're going to look at the participants in a different way. And I think that if you're a part of the community, I think that there's care that goes with telling stories about your own community.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that, just in a comparison, right? A film like Paris, like, first of all, there's an unspoken rule in documentary film that documentaries are almost always for the purpose of educating white people, right? Mm-hmm. That teaching them about the environment so that they, buy smaller cars. You're teaching them, about the kind of the transmutability of fashion and glamour, right? Not only do you love Maybelline, but so do Black trans women love Maybelline. And this is how they talk, and this is what they mean, and this is how they dress, and all of that. And what it does, I think it does, ultimately what it offers is a form of description without any real accountability in terms of like change, right? Like Paris is Burning is not asking the viewer to go out and become an HIV/AIDS activist. It's not saying to the viewer to go into the Black community and help Black people overcome homophobia, transphobia, so that Black kids are not homeless. Pier Kids is the point of being in those uncomfortable scenes with, Crystal's family, is to create kind of like a message of, now what? Now that you know what it's like to live in this skin, right? What are you going to do about it? And I think the only people who can communicate that are people who actually live in the condition. The only way that, the only way that we can really get change is to have active empathy. And I think that people who are of color and homeless and trans, like I'm not trans, most of the people in my movie are trans, so there's still work to be done. But what I hope is that this is a film like my favorite band is Velvet Underground, and their first album sold 4,000 copies. And everyone's like, but it's such a successful album. Why? Because everyone who bought that album started their own band. And some of the coolest bands ever have come from young people hearing that album for the first time and trying to replicate it. So I hope that, we're getting to a place where even more of people can tell their own stories and there's more opportunities and more support. But yeah, if we tell our own stories, you might have the chance to really understand what your privilege does to us. And if you understand that, now you have a responsibility for your own humanity to do better or not. And I don't think that a lot of these films with white folks doing that work about people of color has the same intention behind it.
Thank you. I think that's a really great response. We have some questions coming in from the audience.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Good, so you can hear from someone other than me. Okay, so the first one we have here says, the greatest achievement of the film for me was coming to understand how Crystal was loved by her family despite the challenges. I wonder how much of that was intended.
That's interesting. Well, it's definitely intended in that it made it into the film, right? I think in terms of the moment, it's tough. I wonder what that person means by intended. Like I don't think there's anything disingenuous going on. I don't think Crystal's family are performing acceptance for the sake of looking better on screen. But I do think they wanted me to understand and the audience to understand, the world to understand that even though they have these points of view, these problematic points of view, they still love their child, and I think that's an important thing. And that's why I wanted it to be in the movie the way that it's in the movie, because I think that, like racism is a many-headed beast. And I think one of the most racist things the gay rights movement has done is to somehow paint Black Americans as being always already homophobic and transphobic. That by virtue of being born Black, that you are predisposed to a certain type of hatred. And I don't think that that's entirely true. I think that very often, that point of view is a privileged one that seeks to kind of erase their own culpability in this situation of queer youth homelessness. So having Crystal's family express that love was important to me, because it's way more complicated than I hate my child for being gay or trans. These Black parents are worried as to whether or not their children can survive white supremacy. And they know that if their kids are straight, the odds are tough, let alone trans gay, trans-masculine, what have you, lesbian, you know? So yeah, like it's intentional. It's intentional. We have to realize that there's a role that we all play in this, and that if white Americans really want to see it be better for homeless queer youth of color, right? That rather than kind of assuming that Black folks aren't wise enough or smart enough to be able to be worldly enough and progressive to accept gay people, right? Maybe we can start asking about what is it that I can be doing to make it easier for these folks so they're not so stressed that a queer child becomes a moment of alarm.
Chester, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think I agree with Elegance pretty much. I think he covered it all, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
With that question.
Get the next one.
Yeah, I get the next one.
You get the next one.
Okay, well, here's the next one from another viewer. Hello, Elegance and Chester. This is Tanya, pronouns they, them, from the previous roundtable. How does the medium of film help us find and investigate what home means for us as LGBTQ plus creators?
I think that the medium of film shows us what home is, because it shows you that, you know, it's more than just the heteronormative way of living, you know, like there's other ways to experience family, and there's other ways to experience home. And like when you are kicked out, how Pure Kids or how anybody finds chosen family, you know, and people who love them and help them and support and build these tribes outside of their original ones are ways that, you know, you find home through film. But I think that when you see films that show alternative ways of finding families and finding homes, I think that it paints a picture that leaves people more open-minded and willing to help or even hear things that's different than what they're used to hearing, you know?
I think for LGBTQ creators, you know, that's the fun part about being queer is that we get to do everything in a queer way. We get to have sex like queers. We get to, like, you know, write poems like queers and cook like queers and decorate like queers. And I think that there's something to be said about making movies like queers, right? To look for a queer aesthetic and to kind of like insist upon using that the medium to show, to make visceral what home means. Like when one of my favorite things about the ballroom scene is how all of the groups are called houses. Yet, and I remember when I first started kind of doing work with this community, people who were outsiders to it would ask me, like, do they actually have like houses? Like, are they brownstones? I mean, you know, Glitz now has a house, so we are experiencing an evolution of this idea. You know, even Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia had Star House at one point. But what I love is the idea that for queer people, you know, to a certain extent, whether we're making love and making family, or just making love or just making family, we make one another into our homes. We are homes for one another. That by loving one another, we are creating a safe space within which one can be their full and authentic selves. And in so doing, you get the opportunity to have someone actually understand you and to actually identify and empathize with you. And in that way, that's what home is. To me, home is the place where you feel safest to be yourself. And we do that just by being with each other. So I hope throughout my career, I can find ways to make that visual and to make that compelling on screen and make it, you know, be able to say that with a shot, you know, versus some dialogue, you know. Yeah.
I would love if you made shirts that I could purchase that said we get to have sex like queers, cook like queers, make films like queers. This is a prime merch opportunity.
Thank you. I need the merch. I need some extra income, so I'm going to take you up on that.
Please let me know. I will get one. We have another question from the audience that asks, how did you accomplish the brilliant lighting on the river? And did you lose valuable content where the lighting wasn't enough for you?
Yes, so many times. I mean, I'm an art queer, I'll say. um, and I really, really love Caravaggio. He's one of my favorite painters. And Caravaggio, what he's most famous for is the depth of his shadows and the weight of his shadows, how he's able to use darkness to show the quality of light. So I use that as a guide when filming at night. Kind of, on the pier, there's like a few predictable light sources at night. There's the awning by the pizza place. There's the pier itself where they put the police lights up. Like every few blocks, there are police lights. So you kind of know where the extent of that light is, like how far it's going to reach. So I would set my cameras in ways to kind of, again, like I find darkness beautiful. I don't find darkness foreboding. And well, I don't find it entirely foreboding. I find it to be beautiful. So I was trying to set my camera in such a way to where the way I see it and it made me feel the beauty I see in darkness and the comfort I have in it. Closets are dark. I've been in many closets in my life, so that's kind of how I thought about it from a cinematography point of view. And I'm also like, big into photography. Nan Golden shoots a lot of low light stuff. That being said, I have a lot of incredible stuff that you can't see what's happening. So, you win some, you lose some.
This is just for me, a follow-up question, since you're a Caravaggio fan. Are you also a Pedro Costa fan?
Yeah, I am. I'm more so lately. I've just really begun watching those films, but for sure, because again, it's chiaroscuro, available light type of filmmaking. And also like in this idea of like an aesthetic of, for Pedro Costa, he's kind of lumped into like this kind of third world cinema, which I find to be kind of pejorative and problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, there's something to be said about the constraints that artists of color have. And how do you use those constraints to advance your art rather than see it as a detriment to your art, right? Like, because I don't have like he doesn't have $10 million to make these movies. He's got to figure out how to get the image across and ends up making some of the most beautiful stuff out there. Yeah, for sure.
Totally. Yeah, I was thinking of Costa earlier when you were talking about the collaborative process of working with the subjects, because that's like Costa's deal also, because he's technically an outsider from like the Fountain House group that he makes films with and lets them kind of guide where the film is going. But sorry, that was just me nerding out on film references since I have you captive here. A couple more comments, questions. Oh, first one, a comment, by the way. Tanya says, thank you for that beautiful answer. And that was Tanya's question was the one about home and how the medium of film helps or investigates queer ideas of home. Another question, from my man Petey. Hey Petey, thanks for watching. We all love Petey here. Hello, would you like to share any more about the scene where you and another young person were confronted by the New York Police Department at Pride? Those were unforgettable images.
Oh, wow. I think, well, first off, like kind of back to the aesthetics of the film. First off, I want to say hello to Petey and let the world know that Milwaukee has a true light of a human being, and that is Petey. So get into the light, bask in the light of Petey.
Yes.
All that to be said, because the film is from the perspective of a peer kid, whenever I see a police officer in my life, I'm not talking about the film, in my life, I will stop the conversation, look and see what the police officer is doing to make sure they're not coming towards me. Continue my conversation if I'm safe, while the whole time keeping an eye on that cop, right? And so there's many scenes in the movie where we might be doing something with someone, but then a cop comes along and then the camera kind of pans to see that the cop is there. So with that being the reality, it's only a matter of time before you have a violent interaction with a police officer, because their whole point of view is to kind of cleanse the area of problematic people. And by virtue of being poor and Black, and when I say poor and Black, I mean you don't own a brownstone in the West Village. You don't have a key to an apartment. You're not at a restaurant having dinner, right? You're on the street. And unfortunately, to some of these cops, they view us as so much trash on the street. They don't view us as being valuable. They view us as being detrimental to property value. You know, this is a gentrifying West Village. So as much as this is a safe space, a iconic, you know, gay right, the birth of the gay rights movement as we know it is happening from this location, and we're at Pride celebrating that. These cops view Black kids as being not a part of that because they're not the moneyed gays who own property down there. They're not the success stories of this movement. They are the problems. They are the failures of the movement. So we have to gentrify them out of the space. So for that cop to put his hands on the kid, this is normal. This happens all day long. When they get the opportunity to push you around, they do it because they've been told by their bosses to clean up the street. And because you're Black, you're the dirt that they want to clean up. And they treat you like that. You know? So, but what I really wanted, why that scene is in the movie, the way it's in the movie, is I experimented with kind of removing my voice from it at times, is because I think it's important to show that, one, like in this era where like people have cameras, that the moment you pull that camera up, it changes the dynamic of the situation. If I didn't have a camera on me and he put his hands on me and I said, "Sir, could you please stop?" he might have grabbed me and done way more for offending his manhood. Because I have that camera, now he's got to ask himself, is this really worth it? Do I really want to keep putting my hands on this person? So I wanted people to see like the difference between being seen as a full human being and being seen as a nuisance is as simple as like a consumer good.
I want to encourage other viewers to continue to post your questions in. This was just a comment saying lots of love for the t-shirt idea. So now you have a mandate. Kind of picking up off of that, earlier I had wanted to ask about like cinematic influences, but I think since we've touched on a lot of that, I wanted to like dovetail that question in with this one, which builds off of this conversation about the police and what the police are a force for in this nation. Is right now, because of this resurgence of this protest movement and the uprisings that we're seeing that are fighting back against, you know, white supremacist police policies, as well as more structural oppressions in the United States. I've been seeing a lot on social media and film communities, lots of people sharing films and film titles and different, the work of Black creatives as guides to help people that are just now coming to a critical consciousness. And Pier Kids is definitely one of those films that I recommend because it's, as we've been talking about, it's both this, you know, beautiful artistic work, but also this very astute, critical, political film. Not that those two are separate things, but oftentimes I think the conversation kind of splits films into it's either a work of art or it's just a kind of political message. And I would really love to hear, if I can put you on the spot, if you have films that you recommend that are doing this kind of work that could help people in their journey to critical consciousness.
Sure. Battle of Algiers is a film. I think it's by Gio Pontecorvo about the Algerian Revolution from the perspective of the colonized versus the colonizer. And it feels like a documentary, but it's not a documentary. And I just think stylistically it's kind of brilliant.
LA?
Oh, yeah, LA 92. Yeah, you got to watch LA 92 on Netflix. Netflix is giving me everything that I wanted television to do. And I'm really excited about some of the programming that they have on there. LA 92 gives you a front row seat to the Watts riots of 1992 after Rodney King. And a lot of people like myself, right, had camcorder, so you get to see people who were there. I don't know the story of the footage, but it seems like all the footage is collected from people who were on the ground at that time, from all the different points of view. So it's great.
When They See Us.
When They See Us is a good one. I also love Mirror Mirror. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
It won Berlin, didn't it?
I think, or was it Toronto?
It may have won Berlin or Toronto.
Yeah,
but it's a very underrated movie. But it's for free on. Our kitty is named after Consuela.
Yeah, in that film, Consuela Cosmetic in that movie. It's about a young, not a young, but a 40-something trans woman who is in the last stages. Well, that is still young, but she's in the last stages of fighting AIDS. And it's got this kind of Pedro Almodovar performativity to it, but it's totally a documentary. And Hector Extravaganza, a lot of people you've seen in other, like Paris is Burning and other films are in it. What else? In the Eyes of Autumn. That's a great film, a documentary. And then, there's so much. What I can say is this, like when it comes to how I approach trying to find the politics in art, what I say is like, I always try to kind of do like a litmus test of the work to myself. And I try to be sensitive in anything that I watch about what's moving me. And then I interrogate that. Like, I think Sex and the City could be a political film if you're sensitive enough to why it's tickling you in the spot that you're being tickled. If you're trying to unpack that, you can find a way to make even the most mainstream accessible thing. Like, I think people want a magic bullet. They want a book they can read. They want a movie they can watch to kind of wash away whatever problematic worldviews and actions that they have. And to be honest, there is no one movie that will do that for you. The thing that'll do that, you have to divest yourself of white privilege. At whatever you're watching, at some point you have to let this go. And I hope that people who are watching these films know that's the message of the films and follow it.
I'm still here. I think my camera failed, but I heard all of that. Thank you. That was, yeah, I'm definitely picking up what you're laying down there. I think there is this kind of conversation to be had about like finding the perfect text, the perfect film that solves the problem. But it's often like, this is a continuation of the interior work of the individual. And not to get too theoretical, but like my professors were always like, the meaning of the film is produced between you and the thing that you're observing. It's not underneath the film. You're not digging to find this clue. You're making it yourself with what you're watching.
If you see a black person pulled over by the police and you're white, get out of your car and stop them from being killed. That's better than Gio Pontecorvo's whole catalog. You know what I mean?
100%, yes.
But his catalog is pretty sickening, though, I will say.
Yeah, Battle of Algiers is a great film to check out if viewers have not seen it. I think in terms of moving towards wrapping up the conversation, I would love to ask, first, what is next for Pier Kids? And what is next for both of you? And you can take that in any order you would like.
We're looking for distribution for Pier Kids. Ideally, we would love this to go to a PBS where a lot of people can see it, or a Netflix or Hulu streaming service. Because we do think it's very important that, parents see this, and Black families and even white families see this, so they know that there's another alternative for kicking their kids out and they can understand them a bit more. We also want to distribute the film educationally to who the film affects, so middle schoolers, high schoolers. We think this film should be a part of sex education. We think that it's a great library film. People should be able to get this in your local public libraries for free,
Yeah. And in terms of what's next?
In colleges, sorry.
In colleges, in
churches. Churches and colleges. Yeah. Y'all should be screening this film too.
Biblical retreats. We want
museums. Everybody should be screening this film because this film affects everyone.
Yeah, we're homeless queer youth are the largest amount of queer youth out on the streets right now. Half of them are people of color. Most of them are Black. This has been going on since 1969, the Stonewall riots, at least. This, that's what we know, that two homeless trans women of color fought back against police brutality that night. However, this has probably been going on since before that. And the fact of the matter is, this is a national crisis. And we see with COVID, you can't solve a national crisis if only the people who are being affected are interested in solving it. We all have to put in our work to figure out how to educate and take care of these precious children. In terms of what's next, we are on the eve of shooting my first fiction feature film. It's called The Inspection. It's about a homeless kid who joins the Marines to change his life, but must conceal his attraction to his drill instructor in order to survive boot camp. It's set during 2005, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's kind of like, Moonlight at boot camp, Beau Travail, Jarhead, kind of the influences of the movie.
We also have a couple of things in our cauldron that we have cooking and development that you'll hear about soon.
Yes.
But seriously, on the distribution side, if anyone here watching the film has connections to distribution, please reach out to Milwaukee Film. And even Milwaukee Film, if you have connections to distribution locally, like PBS and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Connect us. And thank you for the platform as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. You guys have been
really good to us.
Fast family, so we appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the work and sharing it with us and being game to do these Q&As. I want to end with asking, how can people support you or follow you or stay plugged into your work?
You can follow Pier Kids on Instagram, Facebook, Pier Kids, PIERKIDS. You can follow me on all platforms, Algernal, ALGERNAL.
I'm at Elegance Bratton on Instagram, at Langston Cruz on Twitter. And yeah, that's the best way to follow and support. And if you see me, fundraising for something on Kickstarter, it's not happening yet, but if it happens, remember this conversation. You can help that way too.
Heck yeah.
Watch the film. If you haven't seen the
watch
film
the
yet,
film. Please.
Tell 5 people, get 5 people that haven't watched the film to watch the film. Because again, this is something that everyone should be aware of.
That's right.
The subject matter.
That's right.
Absolutely. I can't signal boost that film enough. If you haven't yet seen Pier Kids, please get people to watch it. It's one of my favorite films of last year, and one of the best films of the decade, American films. So please check it out. Chester, Elegance, thank you so much for being here. Everyone at home watching, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. And everyone watching this on replay on YouTube, you rule also. I'm Aster for Genre Queer at Milwaukee Film. A big thanks to Elegance and Chester for being here. And